Get out of here!
HOA Karen claimed my yard for a friend's anniversary party, smiling like she owned it. She didn't know I was trained to spot lies before they finished forming. The morning started quietly, the kind of quiet that settles into your bones when you've lived too many years alert. I was watering the grass along the east fence line of my yard, watching the sun crawl up the brick wall of my house, when a black SUV stopped in front of my driveway. It wasn't the vehicle that caught my attention. It was the confidence with which the woman stepped out. She walked like the ground owed her something. Clipboard tucked against her chest, oversized sunglasses, perfect posture. I recognized that walk instantly. Authority without legitimacy. HOA Karen energy at its purest. She didn't greet me. She didn't ask my name. She simply stepped onto my lawn as if it were already hers and pointed toward the center oak tree. "This area will need to be cleared by Friday," she said. "We're hosting a private event." I shut off the hose slowly, letting the water drip into the soil. "Private for who?" I asked. She sighed, already irritated. "For my friends. It's their anniversary. 30 years. The HOA approved it." I looked past her clipboard to the SUV, where two men sat pretending not to watch. Security? No, just neighbors pressed into service. I'd seen this tactic before in other countries, other contexts. Create social pressure, assert dominance, act fast so no one checks facts. "This is my yard," I said calmly. She finally turned to look at me, lips tightening. "No, it's not. This is common use green space. The HOA maintains it." I smiled, not because it was funny, because she was wrong, and wrong people tend to get loud when reality shows up. "The HOA doesn't maintain my property," I replied, "and you're trespassing." Karen laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Sir, I've lived here for 15 years. I know every inch of this neighborhood." "That's impressive," I said. "I've owned this property longer." Her eyes flicked down to the clipboard. "Records say otherwise." That was my cue. I walked to the patio table and picked up the folded survey map I'd been using to plan a garden extension. I didn't unfold it yet. I wanted to see how far she'd go. "You have until Friday," she continued. "Decorations, catering trucks, music. We expect cooperation." I leaned closer. "You should cancel." Her smile vanished. "Excuse me?" "You should cancel the event," I repeated, "because hosting it here will cause problems you don't want." Karen straightened, clearly offended. "Are you threatening me?" "No," I said. "I'm advising you." She snapped the clipboard shut. "If you interfere with this event, the HOA will fine you daily, and we will involve the authorities." That almost made me laugh. Almost. Instead, I nodded. "Please do." She turned and walked back to the SUV, heels stabbing into ground like punctuation marks. As the vehicle pulled away, I felt a familiar tightening in my chest. Not fear, but readiness. This wasn't about a yard. It never is. It was about entitlement colliding with facts. I went inside and opened the locked drawer beneath my desk. Inside were documents I rarely needed anymore. Deeds, international certifications, old identification cards with seals most people never notice. I hadn't planned on revisiting that part of my life today, but Karen had a way of forcing issues. By noon, the HOA notices began. Emails, automated messages, a formal warning taped to my mailbox claiming unauthorized obstruction of community property. I read each one carefully, noting phrasing, assumptions, escalation paths. Bureaucracy speaks a language, and I'm fluent. At 2 p.m, Karen returned, this time with company. 2 HOA board members and a city permits officer who looked deeply uncomfortable. She gestured toward me like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "This is the homeowner refusing compliance," she said. The officer cleared his throat. "Sir, we're here to verify property boundaries." "Perfect," I replied. "I have the survey." Karen scoffed. "We already have one." I unfolded mine on the hood of my car. The officer leaned in. His eyebrows rose almost immediately. "This shows a lot extending 6 feet past the oak," he said. "Yes," I replied. "Filed and recorded." You can check the county registry. Karen's face tightened. That can't be right. The officer pulled out his tablet and began typing. Silence stretched. One of the board members shifted uncomfortably. After a moment, the officer nodded. He's correct. This yard is privately owned. Karen's voice sharpened. That's impossible. The HOA has used this space for years. Usage doesn't equal ownership, I said gently. Her eyes burned into mine. You're doing this on purpose. Yes, I thought. Out loud, I said, I'm protecting my property. The officer rolled up the tape measure. There's no violation here. Any event would require the owner's permission. Karen snapped. This is outrageous. Do you know who you're inconveniencing? I met her gaze. No, but I know who's inconveniencing me. They left in a hurry. Karen already dialing her phone. I watched them go, knowing this wasn't over. People like her don't retreat. They regroup. That evening, I received a message slid under my door. No letterhead. Just a note. Be reasonable. This matters to her daughter. That changed things. Not because I cared about the anniversary, but because when someone brings family into a power play, they reveal desperation. And desperation makes mistakes. I sat at my desk, staring at the note, and made a decision. If Karen wanted to escalate, I would let her. She had no idea who she was dealing with, or how dangerous assumptions can be. By nightfall, I had already begun documenting everything. Times, names, threats, communications. Old habits die hard. And somewhere in the city, Karen was planning a celebration on land she didn't own, for people who trusted her authority. She was about to learn the cost of that trust. By the next morning, the neighborhood felt different. Not louder, not busier, just tense, like a room where an argument had happened after you left. Curtains shifted when I stepped outside. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Karen's version of events was already circulating, wrapped in urgency and victimhood. I was the unreasonable homeowner, the obstacle, the man trying to ruin a once-in-a-lifetime anniversary. She was good at that part. She always is. At 9 sharp, a landscaping truck pulled up at the edge of my property. 2 workers stepped out, hesitating, checking their phones. I walked toward them before Karen could arrive to stage her authority. Morning. I said, You're on private property. One of them nodded nervously. We were told this space was approved. Not by me. They exchanged a look and climbed back into the truck. The engine turned over, then stopped. They waited. Karen arrived 10 minutes later, alone this time. Fury barely contained beneath a practiced smile. She didn't step onto the grass. That was new. She stood at the edge, arms crossed. You're enjoying this, she said. No, I replied. I'm documenting it. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're clever, but this isn't over. I agree. She took a breath. My friend's daughter is flying in. She planned everything. You're embarrassing people. That sounds unfortunate, I said, but it's not my responsibility. Karen leaned closer, lowering her voice. What do you want? There it was. Negotiation. I shook my head. This is a negotiation. She straightened. Everyone has a price. I don't, I said, and you should stop assuming that. Her expression hardened. You're making enemies. I smiled slightly. I've met worse. She left without another word, heels clicking faster than before. The truck drove off behind her. I returned inside and added timestamps to my log. By afternoon, the pressure shifted. Instead of confrontation, it became isolation. HOA emails stopped copying me. Notices were sent community-wide, framing me as an unnamed obstructionist. A neighbor I'd spoken to for years crossed the street to avoid me. Another shook his head and muttered something about selfishness. That's how social leverage works. You don't attack the target directly. You poison the environment around them. At 4 p.m., my doorbell rang. This time it wasn't Karen. It was her daughter. She looked nothing like her mother. Softer posture. Nervous hands. Late 20s, maybe early 30s. She held a gift bag, the kind you bring to smooth things over. I'm sorry to bother you, she said. I'm Emily. I nodded. I know who you are. She swallowed. My mom says you're refusing to let us use the yard. I'm refusing because it's mine, I corrected gently. She sighed. It's just for one evening. I studied her face. She believed that. She believed this was small. That's how these things spread. Through people who don't know the full story. Emily, I said, has your mother shown you the deed? She hesitated. She said it's complicated. It isn't, I replied. It's very simple. I invited her inside. She looked surprised but stepped in. I laid the documents out on the table. The survey, the county record, the purchase agreement. I let her read in silence. Her shoulders slumped. She told us the HOA owned it. She told you what benefited her. I said. Emily pressed her lips together. She's under a lot of stress. I'm sure, I replied, but stress doesn't create ownership. She nodded slowly. I'll talk to her. That would be wise. As she stood to leave, she turned back. She said you were threatening her. I met her eyes. I haven't threatened anyone. I've only refused. Emily left quietly. I watched her walk down the path, shoulders heavy. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. That evening, my phone rang from an unknown number. I answered. You embarrassed my daughter, Karen snapped. I told her the truth. I replied. You had no right. I had every right, I said. It's my property. She laughed, brittle and sharp. You think you've won? No, I said. I think you're escalating. There was a pause. Then her voice dropped. You don't know who my friends are. That was the moment I stopped treating this like a neighborhood dispute. I know exactly who they aren't, I replied. They aren't owners of this land. She hung up. I sat in silence for a long time after that. Then I opened a different drawer, the one I hadn't touched in years. Inside were credentials that didn't impress people unless they knew what they were looking at. International seals, clearance levels, identification issued in a language Karen wouldn't recognize. I didn't plan to use them. Not yet, but I prepared the ground. The next day, the HOA sent a formal cease and desist accusing me of obstructing a community event. It cited bylaws that didn't apply and consequences they couldn't enforce. Sloppy. Emotional. Karen's fingerprints were all over it. I responded with a single sentence. Direct all further communication through legal counsel. That triggered panic. By noon, an emergency HOA meeting was scheduled. By evening, rumors spread that I was hiding something. When people can't understand resistance, they invent motives. At sunset, a police cruiser rolled slowly past my house, then circled back. The officer stepped out, polite but cautious. We received complaint, he said. Possible harassment. From who? I asked. HOA representative. I nodded. Would you like the documentation? He hesitated, then said yes. I handed him a folder. He flipped through it, eyebrows rising, posture shifting. When he finished, he cleared his throat. Sir, he said quietly, I don't think they should have called us. I agree, I replied. He left without another word. That night, Karen made her final mistake. She sent an email community-wide, accusing me by name of intimidation, harassment, and threats. She claimed I had used my background to frighten her. She didn't know how accurate that sentence was. Because once accusations cross certain lines, they stop being neighborhood drama and start becoming something else entirely. And that was territory I understood far better than she did. She thought the HOA could scare me into silence. What Karen didn't know was that once false accusations start, I stop being neighbor and start being a problem. The email Karen sent spread to the neighborhood faster than any official notice ever had. By morning, everyone had an opinion about me, and none of them had asked for facts. Screenshots were forwarded, comments added, assumptions layered on top of assumptions. According to her, I was dangerous, secretive, and abusing government connections to intimidate a harmless HOA volunteer. It was a classic inversion of reality, and she delivered it with enough confidence that people believed her. I didn't respond publicly. Silence, in moments like that is strategic. Instead, I documented everything. The timestamps on the email, the language implying criminal behavior, the false claims of harassment. In my previous line of work, accusations weren't just insults. They were triggers. Every word Karen had chosen carried consequences she didn't understand. By midday, the HOA president requested a private meeting, not at the clubhouse, but at a neutral location, a cafe near the main road. That choice alone told me the board was nervous. They didn't want witnesses. Karen arrived late, sunglasses on despite the cloudy sky. She didn't sit down. She stood beside the table, arms crossed, already defensive. "This has gone too far," the president began. "I agree," I said calmly. Karen scoffed. "You're the one escalating." I slid a printed copy of her email across the table. "This is defamation." Her mouth opened, then closed. "I was warning the community." "You accuse me of criminal intimidation," I replied. "That's not a warning. That's a claim." The president rubbed his temples. "Karen, did you verify any of this?" "She threatened me." Karen snapped. "I refuse you." I corrected. "On my own property." The room went quiet. The president looked at the document again. "We're going to need to involve legal counsel." Karen laughed sharply. "Good. I welcome it." So did I. That afternoon, I made a call I hadn't made in years. Not to threaten, not to boast, but to notify. There are systems that don't activate until certain thresholds are crossed. False allegations tied to misuse of authority crossed those thresholds. Within hours, Karen's email was no longer just an HOA issue. It was evidence. The next day, 2 unfamiliar cars parked across the street from her house. No markings, no drama, just presence. I watched from my window as Karen noticed them, her posture stiffening, her confidence faltering for the first time. She called me 30 minutes later. "What did you do?" she demanded. I responded. I said, "You sent people to my house." "I didn't send anyone," I replied. "I informed the appropriate channels of your claims." Her voice wavered. "You said you weren't threatening me." "I'm not," I said evenly, "but false accusations trigger reviews. That's not my doing." She hung up without another word. By evening, the HOA board rescinded all notices related to my property. An apology email was drafted, then revised, then delayed. No one wanted to admit fault, but fear had replaced arrogance, and fear changes behavior quickly. Emily came by again that night, this time without a gift bag. "She's panicking," Emily said quietly. "They're asking questions." "That happens when you accuse someone of crimes," I replied. She didn't mean it like that. "Intent doesn't erase impact," I said gently. Emily nodded, eyes tired. She just wanted the party to be perfect. I looked at her for a long moment. Perfection built on lies collapses. She left without arguing. 2 days before the planned anniversary, the event was officially canceled. The caterers refunded deposits. The decorations were returned. Karen told everyone it was due to logistical issues. No one challenged her. They were too busy distancing themselves. Then came the knock on her door. This time, it wasn't police. It wasn't the HOA. It was an investigator following up on a complaint involving misuse of authority and false reporting. Karen tried to spin it, tried to laugh it off, but laughter doesn't work on people trained to listen for inconsistencies. By the end of the week, Karen resigned from the HOA board citing personal reasons. The apology email finally went out, vague and carefully worded, avoiding names but acknowledging miscommunication. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal. People waved again. Conversations resumed. No one apologized directly, but avoidance turned back into politeness. As for me, my yard remained quiet, undisturbed. Mine. On the night of the anniversary that never happened, I sat under the oak tree Karen had tried to claim. The grass was still damp from watering. The air cool and calm. Somewhere across the neighborhood, Karen's house was dark. Power, I've learned, doesn't shout. It waits. And when people mistake entitlement for authority, they eventually collide with reality. Karen thought she was dealing with a stubborn homeowner. She never realized she was the one trespassing into a space she never should have entered. The aftermath didn't arrive loudly. It came in quiet adjustments, subtle shifts that only someone trained to notice patterns would recognize. Karen didn't leave her house for 2 days after resigning from the HOA board. Her curtains stayed drawn, packages set untouched on her porch. The neighborhood group chat, once filled with passive-aggressive messages and poorly disguised gossip, went silent. People don't like uncertainty, and Karen had become exactly that. On the third morning, I noticed a moving truck parked halfway down the street. Not at Karen's house, but close enough to make a statement. It wasn't leaving yet. It was waiting. Waiting is always more telling than movement. I watched from my window as Emily stepped outside, speaking to a man in a gray jacket, his posture formal, his gestures measured. She nodded repeatedly, her face tight with worry. By noon, Emily knocked on my door one last time. She looked exhausted. "They're reviewing everything," she said without preamble. Her emails, the complaints, the false reports. "I expected that," I replied. "She doesn't understand how it got this far." "That's usually the problem," I said calmly. Emily hesitated. "She keeps asking who you really are." I considered my answer carefully. "I'm someone who doesn't appreciate lies written in my name." Emily nodded, accepting that explanation without pressing further. "She's scared." "Fear can be useful," I said, "if it teaches restraint." Emily managed a faint smile before turning to leave. That was the last time she spoke to me. The investigation concluded quietly. No arrests, no headlines, just consequences. Karen was barred from holding any position of authority within the HOA indefinitely. The board issued a revised policy regarding property verification, clearly designed to prevent another incident like hers. They avoided mentioning her name, but everyone knew. As for the false accusations, they didn't disappear. They were documented, archived, and attached to her record like invisible ink that only appears under the right light. People underestimate how long systems remember. Neighborhoods forget. Databases do not. A week later, I received a formal letter of apology from the HOA's legal counsel. It acknowledged misconduct, improper claims, and reputational harm. It offered compensation for inconvenience. I declined the money. Accepting it would have implied the dispute was transactional. It wasn't. Instead, I requested a written acknowledgement of property boundaries be filed with the county and distributed to every resident. Permanence matters. They agreed. The document arrived 3 days later, stamped, sealed, undeniable. My yard was mine, on paper and in memory. The oak tree stood exactly where it always had, now officially beyond question. Karen listed her house shortly after. The sign appeared quietly one morning, white and unassuming. No open house, no celebration, just departure. People waved politely when they saw her, but no one asked why she was leaving. Some questions answered themselves. On her last evening in the neighborhood, Karen stood at the edge of my property line. She didn't cross it. She didn't speak. She just stood there, looking at the yard she had tried to claim, the space that had unraveled her authority. I stepped outside. "You could have asked," I said evenly. She flinched slightly, then straightened. "It wasn't supposed to go like this." "It always does," I replied, "when people confuse power with permission." She shook her head. "You ruined everything." I met her gaze. "No, I stopped you." For a moment, she looked like she might argue. Then her shoulders sagged. She turned and walked away without another word. The moving truck left the next morning. Life returned to its routines. Lawns were mowed. Packages delivered. Children played in the street again. The HOA meetings became shorter, quieter, more cautious. Rules were followed more carefully. Authority was questioned more often. That was the real change. One afternoon, months later, a new neighbor stopped by while I was trimming the hedge. "I heard there was some kind of dispute here," he said casually. "There was," I replied. He nodded toward the oak tree. "About that?" "Yes." He smiled. "Glad it worked out." "So am I," said. As he walked away, I reflected on how easily things escalate when entitlement goes unchecked. Karen hadn't been evil. She'd been convinced. Convinced that wanting something badly enough made it hers. Convinced that confidence could replace consent. Convinced that authority, once claimed, couldn't be challenged. She was wrong. I never told anyone about my past, my training, or the systems that moved quietly once lines were crossed. I didn't need to. Power doesn't need explanation. It needs discipline, and restraint is its strongest form. The oak tree still casts its shadow across the grass every evening, steady and unmoved. It doesn't care who claims it. It knows where it stands. And so do I.